guys, and welcome back to the channel. Finally, the day has come. The D16Y8 is coming out and the B18B1 is going in. So in this video, I'm going to try and cover as much as I can about the B series swap. I am doing this over a weekend, so I got a lot of work cut out for me. So let's get changed and we'll get started. Alright guys, here's all the parts that I've laid out that I'm going to be using for the B series swap here. Now, starting from left to right, this is my tucked harness that I did in a previous video. This is a DA intake pipe that I'm going to be using because it's a little bit bigger diameter than the D series ones. These are some Hasport engine mounts, and I purchased some new hardware with that. These are some B series radiator hoses that are made for an EF. These are some axles for a 94 to 01 Integra. That's because it's matching the half shaft that I'm going to be running from a 94 to 01 Integra. This is a shift linkage made for an EF B series swap. You could actually use the any stock B series shift linkage and just shorten it for the EF by cutting and welding, of course. But I decided to just run a brand new one. I also have a welded one as well. And these are some polyurethane bushings with it, as well as a new washer. Back here is a catalytic converter that's made for Integra. I might be modifying this to get it to fit so that, there's might be some different lengths with the exhaust. This is a header made for a 92 to 93 Integra that I'm probably going to be running. And back here is the radiator. It's a stock radiator for the 88 to 91 Civic. So it's a D series radiator. So we'll have to tighten the hoses a little bit tighter just to get the B series ones to fit. But I want to run a brand new radiator. So those are all the parts that I'm going to be running. There might be some stuff that are missing here, but we'll go over that as we get into the swap. All right, guys, we're going to just start by pulling off everything. Not much to be said there. Basically clearing up the engine bay like we did the last time. Most of the stuff is disconnected from the top. We just need to disconnect the fuel lines and the coolant lines, and then we could pull the motor out. But before we do that, I'm going to go under and, we'll have to disconnect the suspension components as well. So once we do that, we can start pulling the motor out. So what I am going to do is I'm going to save this radiator fluid because it's fairly new. All I'm going to do is run it through a paint filter, and then we're going to reuse this. No point in wasting perfectly good rad fluid. Alright guys, everything is disconnected. I've disconnected the hoses and everything. It is all clear. It should be good to actually just pull out. Actually, I got a couple more hoses to disconnect. I guess the heater core hoses. So I'll disconnect those two, and then the engine could be hooked up to the hoist and just pulled out. Slowly does it now. There you go. The D16Y8 is finally out. Now we need to prep the engine bay for the B18B1. Alright guys, next step is actually to
pound this area out to clear the B series alternator. I don't really want to dent the frame rail, but you really have no choice when you're going B series unless you want to run a D series alternator, but I'm going to go for a B series alternator. That's the appropriate alternator for the engine. So what we have to do is dent out this entire area right below this square here. This whole area needs to be dented out about 1/2 inch in. Alright guys, there was no way around it, couldn't really protect it, so I've dented it in. If you go look at an angle like that, you can see it curves in a little bit. I think that is good enough. We'll figure it out once we test fit the engine in, but I think this is good enough. I think in my previous swaps I actually whacked it out a lot more, but this looks good enough to me, I think. Alright guys, this area is all airbrushed. I know the paint doesn't fully match, but this was the leftover paint from when I painted the car. So I just filled it into my paint, my airbrush, and I just sprayed it. And it looks okay. It's protected from rust and it doesn't have all those dings anymore. So I'm pretty happy with it. Obviously, you can see the different color shades because the engine bay is a lot older than the new paint, but I think it'll do. One day I'm gonna just strip the engine bay and repaint the whole thing into like a nice gloss black, but for the time being, this will do. All right guys, so I've been working on tucking the harness because I'm going to be running that tucked harness. So I've run all of the wires from the engine bay that I need for connection inside the car. So you don't see any other harnesses kind of looping out. This side I've done as well. What I've done with this side is I've just depinned it and then just kind of covered it up here so it kind of blends in. I didn't want to pull this whole harness apart and then run the wires inside. This way it's still kind of tucked and not noticeable. So with this one here, I'm going to be looping the tucked harness into this grommet here that I 3D printed, and I've cut a slit into it as well as drilled a hole. So everything should just run right through the AC grommet, and I could easily turn it back to stock if I ever wanted to. All right, now we're going to put it in the rear mount. This is the Hasport one. You're supposed to go to the 2 holes closest to the driver's side. So this way, these 2 holes here. And then I've got a couple of new hardware that I purchased to install these. The M10s by 1.25 and 35 millimeter in length. All right, with the rear engine mount in, we're just going to test fit this T-bracket just to make sure that it doesn't hit anything, because we might have to like hammer down the rear cross member. All right, I had to put some Silglide on the bracket just so they could slide in and out easier, because it was just really sticking up onto the bushing there. And it looks like there's quite a bit of room back here. Not a whole lot, but I don't think I need to hammer this rear cross member down or anything. I'm just going to leave it as is. If anything, it's just going to have a little bit of additional vibrations, but I think with the engine like this, it should be fine. And it's all lined up on the back already. All right, time to get this engine in. We're gonna have to angle it so that the passenger side tucks, for the transmission side, tucks underneath the mount, and then lower it all the way to the ground and then raise it back up. All right, the engine's kind of positioned, so I have to actually start putting in the mount and stuff to hold it in place. But we will have to modify this because it's hitting the engine here. So we'll drop the cross member later, and then we'll just maybe cut this off or hammer it. I don't know what yet, but this is going to interfere with it for sure. All right, I've got the T-bracket on. This is probably the most difficult part, but it's the first step that you should start with. So to make things easier, I put some Sil Glide on the bushings. So just some silicone lubricant. That way it slides in. So I had the engine moved forward, and then I slid the T-bracket in place, bolted it in the back, then positioned it from the front part where it hooks onto the transmission. So then I just leave the other two. So as long as I have two bolts, it'll pivot, and then I'm able to maneuver the engine later. All right, guys, that was a lot of work. We finally got the B18B1 in, and everything is torqued down. Now we just have to hook up the cables and the hoses and all that stuff. So another thing to note is we have to change out this cable here, this throttle cable, to a DA Integra throttle cable, which I have. And then everything else is pretty straightforward. The clutch cable and all that should work as well. So let's just put it all back together and see how it goes. All right, here is the DA cable. It would say SK7 on it. That's what the DA cable would have. So we'll just have to take this cable out and just twist it, and then it'll pop open. And then you just have to disengage it from the pedal. And then the same reverse to install. Now it does have this little rubber boot here that seals it, and I think the new one doesn't have one. Yeah, the new one's missing that. So we'll just transfer that over. All right, so for the fuel line here, I'm gonna have to take the CIVIC one off and then put the DA one on. The reason being is the CIVIC one is a little bit short, so you can see that it's really stretched when it's hooked onto the fuel rail. And because the motor has some movement to it, we want a little bit of slack, and DA one actually has quite a bit of slack. So we're gonna use that one instead. All right, to get your stock clutch cable to fit, you have to take this bracket off and then loop it all together. Unfortunately, the cable is a little bit shorter than the DA one. If you can get a brand new DA one, but these OEM Honda cables are all discontinued. And then you gotta run the cable in. That, and then you could bolt it back. And that way the cable is hooked up now. Yeah, we could still adjust it. It'll be a little bit tight, but it'll be just right. All right, guys, I've cut the mount and I've actually painted it satin black, just with some regular trim clad paint. So it's just waiting to dry right now. I'm gonna wait for a couple hours before I put it back in, so that way I don't compromise the paint or anything like that. In the meantime, I'm gonna install the wiring harness. All right, that grommet works good. As you can see right there, that's where the grommet is. All I did was drill a hole in a 3D printed grommet of mine, and then it fits perfectly. And it has more room for other wires if I need it in the future. So I don't have to ruin an OEM plug, because those are kind of hard to find these days. All right, time to install the charge harness. This will just run from here all the way across to where the alternator is. Looks good. All right, charge harness is run through. Engine harness is pretty much installed. We just have to zip up some of the unused connectors. All right, here's the new header. We're gonna use a metal multi-layer gasket instead of the cheap stuff that came with the header. Although the cheap stuff probably seals better, it's a different kind. All right, that looks pretty good.
Alright, because this header is actually perfect length for the EF exhaust, we are going to go with this one instead of the factory exhaust manifold, because the factory exhaust manifold is actually a little bit shorter. Take a look at that, brand new hardware, it looks good. Bring you guys up close. Yeah, that looks bling. Alright guys, it's time to install the half shaft. I'm just going to give it a quick cleanup before I install it. It's kind of greasy and it's been sitting a while, so it's got a lot of dirt on it. This is from a 94 to 01 Integra, so I'm going to be using the same kind of axles that are applicable to this. If you're using a DA half shaft, then you'll use the DA axles. It's mainly the male and female end of the axle that is different. So it's only on the, I believe, the driver's side that's different. All right, guys, so now it's time to put in the axles. So we have to remove this ring, otherwise it's going to cause some binding or something. So I'm just going to tap this out with a screwdriver real quick, and then we can start putting in the axles. Time to put in these rad hoses and see how it goes. Alright, we're going to put the wheel back on so that we can torque this down and just pop the center cap off the wheels, and then that way we can torque this bad boy down. Alright, as I was putting the underguard plastics back, this piece here is touching the header. It's going to pain me to do this, but I'm going to have to notch it out a little bit, so cut it out so that it clears the header and doesn't touch it. Otherwise, it's just going to melt onto the header. Alright, here's the swap so far. Looks pretty good. I've put back the strut bar. Everything is installed on this side. We are having problems with the radiator hose. The B series radiator hoses that came with it, the bottom one fits, but the top one doesn't. And I've chopped it up and it still doesn't fit. So I have since ordered a 90 to 93 Integra B18 hose, because the B17 one's actually a little different. So it actually goes up like this and then it curves. So it's like a little S curve. I hope that will work. So we'll see when that comes in. So I can't really finish or fire up this thing until I get the hose. Alright guys, now I'm going to transfer over this tightener thing to get rid of the bitch pin for the B swap. So in order for me to do that, I need to grind down this pin and then maybe unbolt this and pop it off. I wanted to measure because it comes with two different kinds of bushings. This one it comes with B series ones as well. And the B series ones are thick. As you can see, they're super thick. So once you put it onto this tightener, it ends up increasing it by a lot more. So I don't think I'm supposed to use that. And just by measuring the width here, this is 46.5. And then if you measure this here, 45.2. So it's out by about a millimeter. Well, I guess we're supposed to use the smaller bushings on this. So I guess we'll just grind this off and we'll transfer this over. All right, there we go. We punched it out. Now we just transfer this one onto here. Perfect. Now I could install this in the car now. All right, I had to try and figure out how this is supposed to go, this bushing. So with it shifting this way, this will go onto the transmission, then this bushing, and then this goes on top and bolts on. So we're gonna try and press that bushing in right now. Looks like I ran out of the energy suspension
grease, so I'm just going to use some Seal Glide. Pressed in. Alright, now we can torque down.
Alright guys, I've done all that I can with the B series swap so far. I can't fire it up today because we're still missing a couple things. I'm not sure how much footage I've actually captured of me doing the engine swap. It's very difficult to do the work and also film at the same time, especially since I'm climbing in and out from the bottom of the vehicle. Having to adjust the tripod and all that is a lot of work. So I tried to go over as much of the detail for a B series EF swap as I can in the video, but obviously it's not going to be as detailed as I want it to be. You know, I want to show you guys every little increment of how to do it, but it's very difficult to film underneath the car. And you know, having to adjust everything, and the space is super limited here. When I had the engine out, the other engine sitting around, and all the parts laid out everywhere, it's very cramped for space. Very difficult for me to roll in and out of the vehicle as well. Anyways, a couple things that I am missing for this B series swap is one, a upper radiator hose. I have since ordered a D8 Integra one for a 90 to 93 Integra, GS, LS, or RS. The 1.7 liter one looks a little bit different. That's the GSR one. So the hoses that I got were for an EF B series swap. However, I think I showed it in the footage. The bends on that upper radiator hose were completely wrong. I tried to cut the hose and get it to fit, but essentially it doesn't fit, and now the hose is too short for anything. Those hoses were actually quite expensive too because they're silicone hoses. So I could have got a lot more or a lot cheaper rubber hoses for that price. Now I know for next time. I wanted to go for a better hose and it didn't work. Now I'm going to have a mix and match of hoses. Silicone lower hose and probably a rubber upper hose. The other thing that I need to do is figure out the catalytic converter situation. Now the flange that bolts onto the header, it's clocked differently because the Civic and the Integra are a little bit different. So essentially what I need to do is cut the catalytic converter flange and then clock it correctly and re-weld it. Now the difficult part is I can't get the catalytic converter out. The hoses, I mean not the hoses, the bolts that are holding it onto the exhaust side, the back of the catalytic converter, they're completely fused on there. They're rusted out over time. So I've never removed this since I've gotten the vehicle, but now that I've gone under there and tried to remove it, it's very, very seized on there. I have some bolt extractors that I have ordered and they're coming, so hopefully that will help me in getting them off. If not, I'm gonna have to drop the whole exhaust system, take it outside, and just cut those studs off or cut the bolt off. Anyways, those are the couple things that I'm still missing, and obviously putting in the fresh fluid. So I haven't put any engine oil in it or transmission fluid or any rad fluid. So I'm waiting to get those in. So we'll do that in the next video where I finish up this swap and then fire up for the first time. I have already installed all the wiring and plugged in the P75 ECU. Everything is already set in the car, so all it really needs is fluids, finish up the couple things, tidy up, and we're ready to fire up. Anyways guys, I hope this video helps you guys out. If you haven't already, please comment, like, and subscribe, and share my videos. As always guys, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.